Charlotte Griffiths, she ain't playing. She ain't playing. Now that Hazza has lost his case against the Daily Mail, she's coming out guns a-blazing.
Charlotte Griffiths just crossed one of journalism's most guarded lines, revealing that a close Sussex advisor had been her source, and the implications should terrify Harry and Meghan. When a reporter publicly reveals a source, something has gone catastrophically wrong. In this case, Griffiths' account suggests that Sussex advisors helped arrange positive stories in the British press and later allowed Buckingham Palace to take the blame for coverage connected to at least one of those briefings. The Mail on Sunday editor has now pulled back the curtain on one part of that operation, and what she describes raises serious questions about how at least some Sussex-friendly coverage was created and later presented to the public. According to Griffiths, during the summer of 2025, a close advisor to Harry and Meghan contacted her out of the blue and invited her to lunch at the Ivy restaurant in London. This was not a casual social engagement. The advisor came bearing gifts in the form of stories, narratives the Sussex team wanted placed in front of the British public. As a result of information given to her at that lunch meeting, Griffiths placed a series of stories in the Mail on Sunday, portraying the couple in a positive light. One front-page article suggested Harry and Meghan were attempting to rebuild their relationship with King Charles. The reconciliation narrative, the olive branch extended, the poor misunderstood couple trying to heal old wounds, all of it came directly from the Sussex camp. But here is where the scheme reveals its true sophistication. Griffiths claims she was duly tipped off about a meeting between Sussex PR representatives Liam Maguire and Meredith Melling and King Charles's aide Torben Andre at the Royal Overseas League in London. The tip allowed the newspaper to position a photographer to capture what appeared to be a cozy, but very embarrassing scene of the two camps settled on a balcony plainly visible from a public park below. The photos ran everywhere. Front pages across Britain featured images of the supposedly secret talks. Griffiths' account suggests the setup was deliberate and precise, designed to create coverage that would benefit the Sussex narrative while appearing to be organic journalism. Now think about what happened next. Sussex sources briefed the Daily Telegraph, expressing frustration that the meeting details had leaked. They implied, without explicitly stating, that Buckingham Palace was responsible for this grotesque betrayal of trust. The palace declined to comment, which only reinforced the impression that they were the guilty party. Readers walked away believing the institution had once again betrayed Harry and Meghan, leaking sensitive information to embarrass them. Except according to Charlotte Griffiths, the tip originated with a Sussex-linked advisor. If her account is accurate, their team helped initiate the coverage and then publicly expressed frustration when the resulting photographs appeared. Royal commentator according to Taz put it bluntly, saying the meeting was arranged and deliberately leaked to the media so they could blame the palace. They organized the paparazzi to capture the private meeting with the king's staff so that they could play victim. One detail stands out in all of this. Meredith Melling, who was present at the balcony meeting, reportedly looked completely unsurprised when photographers appeared. She was the only one who did not look shocked at the paparazzi intrusion, Taz observed. Taz interpreted that reaction as a sign Melling may have known photographers were coming, although her appearance alone cannot establish what she knew or arranged. The observation carries weight because genuine surprise is difficult to fake, and everyone else at that table apparently displayed the natural reaction of people caught off guard by cameras. Melling did not. If this account is accurate, then every time Harry and Meghan have claimed the press was unfairly hounding them, we need to ask a follow-up question. Who tipped off the photographers in the first place? So why is Charlotte Griffiths revealing all of this now? What changed between the summer of 2025 and today that would prompt a seasoned journalist to violate one of the most sacred rules of her profession? The answer arrived in a London courtroom. Harry lost his lawsuit against the Daily Mail, and commentators described the result as a serious credibility problem for him in the public conversation. Neil Sean argued that evidence involving Harry's former girlfriend was particularly damaging to his case. Griffiths said David Sherborne had portrayed her as a fantasist during proceedings and had effectively suggested she committed perjury. The legal team attacked her honesty, her professionalism, her integrity as a journalist. They went after her credibility in ways that felt personal and damaging. There is an unwritten understanding between journalists and their sources. You protect my identity, and I give you information you cannot get elsewhere. Both parties benefit. Both parties maintain trust. But that compact assumes the source is acting in good faith. What happens when a source uses you to plant stories, then denies any involvement, then sends lawyers after you, claiming you fabricated the whole relationship? The compact shatters. Charlotte Griffiths had protected a Sussex-linked advisor as a source. In return, she believed Harry's legal team attacked her honesty and professional credibility in court. Why would anyone protect a source who repays that protection with accusations of lying under oath? The timing is strategic and deliberate. Griffiths waited until after the judgment. She waited until the legal proceedings concluded. She waited until the judgment in Harry's case had been delivered. Only then did she reveal what actually happened at the Ivy that summer. The media is done being blamed for stories the Sussexes themselves planted. This is not just one journalist settling a score. This represents a potential turning point. If Charlotte Griffiths has more stories to tell, what else will come out? More importantly, how many other journalists have similar tales they have kept private out of professional courtesy? That courtesy has now been publicly revoked. Royal YouTuber Steph the Alter Nerd made an observation that deserves attention. She noted this is insane for Charlotte Griffiths to actually make public. Journalists simply do not reveal their sources. It does not happen. Game over normally. But normally, sources do not turn around and attack the journalists who protected them. Normally, sources do not fund legal campaigns accusing reporters of perjury. The Sussexes created an adversary where they once had an ally. That is a strategic miscalculation with consequences that may take years to fully unfold. One of the first rules of journalism, if anything the cardinal rule, is you never reveal your sources, Steph emphasized. Charlotte Griffiths just revealed a source. After everything that Harry's team tried to do against her during that lawsuit, she is now out for blood. But what did Harry and Meghan actually achieve with all this media manipulation?
The one thing that makes her interesting is that she married a royal. So trying to run away from that is just a terrible brand strategy. But I don't think for 1 minute she wanted to meet the king so that she could fix this family. I think it was a business decision.
Did the King Charles meeting deliver the results they wanted? Understanding what happened at Highgrove requires understanding what Meghan actually sought. Royal correspondent Rob Shooter explained it clearly on Meghan Kelly's show. Meghan desperately needs to remind the world that she is associated with royalty, he said. Her deals have really dried up, and she did not get any of those deals because of some talent. She got all those deals when she married him. She did not have a $100 million deal before she became the Duchess. The math is simple. Meghan's commercial value derives entirely from her royal connection. The farther she drifts from the family, the less interesting she becomes to the people writing checks. The one thing that makes her interesting is that she married a royal, Shooter observed. So trying to run away from that is just a terrible brand strategy. What Meghan wanted from the King Charles meeting was a photograph. Shooter described it as the good housekeeping seal of approval she could monetize. In the world of social media and celebrity branding, a picture of the Sussexes with King Charles, the grandchildren present, everyone smiling, would have been worth millions in future deals. It would have signaled reconciliation. It would have made Meghan look like someone the royal family welcomed back, rather than someone they barely tolerate. We know the world we live in, Shooter explained. We know the world of social media. We want to see a picture of the king, of Meghan, of the children, of Harry, of everybody smiling. The palace said absolutely not. No state visit, no official visit. This is a family visit. No official photographer, no photographs leaked, no statement afterward. The Sussexes met with King Charles at Highgrove for approximately an hour and a half. They had tea, they made small talk. Charles, like all royals, excels at saying absolutely nothing while appearing engaged. It is like cotton candy, Shooter observed. They just talk, and they do not say anything. So he could sit there for an hour and a half and say absolutely nothing. Consider the deliberate choices the palace made. Highgrove sits hours outside London, not central at all. It is a private residence owned by the royal family, not the state. If the palace wanted to signal friendship and reconciliation, they would have hosted the meeting at Clarence House or Buckingham Palace. They would have arranged official photographs. They would have issued a warm statement afterward, describing how wonderful it was to see the grandchildren. None of that happened. The location, the lack of documentation, the absence of any public acknowledgement all sent a clear message. This was not a reunion. This was presented as a grandfather having a private family visit with his grandchildren. If they wanted to give a message that they are friends, again, they would have had them visit them in Clarence House, Shooter noted. They would have had them come to Buckingham Palace. The palace even executed a countermove that demonstrated their media sophistication. On the same day as the Highgrove meeting, William and Kate appeared at a polo match. They kissed. The photographers captured it perfectly. That image ran around the world while the Sussex visit generated nothing because there was nothing to show. Shooter confirmed this was strategic, saying the palace was very smart on this one. While Harry, Meghan, and the children were meeting privately with the king, William was at a polo match and kissed Kate, and that is the photograph that ran around the world the next day. They gave Harry and Meghan access to a cancer patient grandfather who wanted to meet children he barely knows. They gave them nothing that could be commercialized. The question Meghan should be asking herself is whether she actually won anything from this trip, or whether she merely provided the palace with proof that they can manage her without giving her what she wants. Behind the carefully staged public appearances lies a less glamorous reality. Neil Sean's reporting indicates masses of rows behind the scenes in Montecito, with the escalating bills creating major tension. The Daily Mail lawsuit was supposed to be a victory lap, a moment where Harry finally held the tabloids accountable for years of alleged illegal activity. Instead, it became a catastrophic public embarrassment that commentators have framed as one of the most damaging courtroom defeats for a royal figure in recent memory. Neil Sean claimed that discrepancies involving Harry's former girlfriend damaged his case, pointing to documentation she reportedly produced and additional stories that emerged days later. A reputable lawyer in London would have told him this was almost impossible to prove, Sean reported. Harry ignored all that advice. To Sean, pursuing the case against experienced legal teams armed with extensive documentation looked deeply overconfident. Whether Harry believed his status would help him is impossible to know, but critics saw the decision as another example of royal privilege shaping his expectations. The judge did not defer. The financial implications are severe. British legal tradition typically requires the losing party to pay the winner's costs. Associated newspapers reportedly spent large sums defending against claims from Harry and other celebrities, including Elton John and Elizabeth Hurley. The cost figures being discussed in media reports are staggering, though whether Harry personally pays that amount is a separate question that depends on how costs are allocated among the various plaintiffs. Rob Shooter stated plainly on air that Harry does not have this money. The Netflix and Spotify deals were enormous, but they were not infinite. Shooter argued that Meghan's jam business was struggling and that new deals had not materialized at the pace they once did. Sean described the situation as creating friction resembling the Destiny's Child song Bills, Bills, Bills. The Sussexes are looking at escalating costs from multiple directions: legal bills from the failed lawsuit, the ongoing expense of maintaining their Montecito lifestyle, the costs of security that they insist upon but cannot fund through public channels, the staff required to run their foundation and businesses. None of this comes cheap, and the revenue streams that were supposed to fund it all have not delivered as promised. Money pressure of this kind can push public figures toward questionable opportunities, and the Sussexes may find themselves facing difficult choices about how to sustain their current lifestyle.
There's a story circulating around that Sir Elton John doesn't want to help or don't come to me for the bills. Elton was never going to be providing financial security for Prince Harry. That was never part of the deal.
There were rumors that Elton John might help cover legal costs, given his friendship with the couple and his own involvement in the lawsuit. Sean pushed back on this speculation, noting that Elton did not get that clever, that rich, and that famous by giving millions away. He is generous to his charities, but underwriting failed lawsuits for friends falls into a different category entirely. Unless Elton John openly comes out and states that he is now picking up the tab, Sean noted, the assumption should be that each plaintiff bears their own burden. The bills keep rising, and someone has to pay them. If money represents one problem for Harry, identity represents another equally troubling. During his recent podcast appearance with rugby star Joe Marler, Harry was asked about his occupation. His answer revealed everything about how he sees himself. Full-time dad, Harry said. British Army veteran, Prince of England, Duke. When pressed for a single answer, he settled on Duke. Not founder of Archewell, the foundation he and Meghan supposedly run. Not philanthropist or advocate or any of the labels they have tried to attach to their post-royal brand. Duke, a title given to him based on birth, attached to a job he quit. The contradiction is glaring. He left the royal family, renounced his working royal status, moved to another continent, and yet when asked what he does for a living, he reaches for the title that connects him to the institution he claims damaged him. Rob Shooter identified the contradiction clearly. He does not have a job. He has never had a job. He was in the army for a while, which deserves acknowledgement, but he received special treatment even there. He does not know what it is to get up and work every day. He does not know what it is to hustle every day. He has extraordinary privilege, and it is just too bad that he has decided to squander it. The observation cuts to something important about Harry's situation. He wants the benefits of royal status without the obligations. He wants the title without the duty. He wants the recognition without the accountability. Harry also described himself as founder of the Invictus Games during the same conversation. This claim irritated observers who know the actual history. Critics noted that an entire team helped create and deliver the games, arguing that describing Harry alone as the founder minimizes that wider contribution. Taking credit for the work of others while listing Duke as your occupation suggests someone deeply disconnected from how regular people understand work and achievement. It also tells you how much that title actually means to him, Shooter observed. He pretends it does not mean anything to him. He pretends that he does not care. It is in his soul. It is in every fiber of him. He is a prince of England, and how dare you forget it? The podcast interview went further than discussing occupation. Harry joked about grooming habits in crude terms, discussed bodily functions, made comments about pubic hair, and generally behaved in ways that commentators found inconsistent with his claimed identity as a serious advocate for mental health and wounded veterans. Tom Sykes, writing for the Royalist Substack, captured the disconnect perfectly. He noted that Harry has gone to great lengths to let us know he is the most complicated man in Britain. Netflix Harry, Memoir Harry, Mental Health Advocate Harry, Sue the Tabloids Harry, Took the Palace to Court Harry, Oprah Harry, Trauma Harry, then meet Lads on Tour Harry doing bit comedy about incontinence. The tonal whiplash is dizzying. Sykes raised a question worth considering. If the point of these appearances is to promote Invictus, the thing that is actually his best and most defensible claim on public attention, then does this kind of interview help or hurt? Everywhere Harry goes, he brings all of himself, all the baggage, all the contradictions, all the versions, and they wrestle for airtime. The show ends up being about him and never quite about the thing he came to promote. 40 minutes of a man who has spent a decade telling us he is a serious, wounded, dignified survivor of an institution that failed him, telling us what his private parts look like. The brand confusion is total. The Daily Mail judgment did more than create potential financial consequences. It gave Associated Newspapers a major legal victory against claims Harry had presented as part of a wider pattern of press persecution. Harry issued a statement calling the ruling a complete and obvious whitewash. "We came to court seeking justice and accountability," he said. "We have received neither." These are fighting words directed at judges appointed by his own father's government. Royals are taught to respect institutions, to tread carefully when discussing matters of justice and governance. Harry abandoned that convention entirely, publicly attacking a judgment that ran over 400 pages and demonstrated careful consideration of evidence and testimony. To critics, the statement sounded like a refusal to accept an adverse outcome, framing the result as institutional failure rather than legal consequence. For the media, this loss changes the relationship entirely. Reporters and editors accused of misconduct now have a judgment rejecting the claims presented in this case, although that does not validate every action or every story published by the wider press. The accusations were not just rejected privately, they were rejected publicly, in detail, with a written record that will exist forever. The press has been handed ammunition they will use for years. If Charlotte Griffiths felt liberated to reveal her source relationship after the judgment, other journalists may feel similarly emboldened. How many reporters sat across lunch tables from Sussex advisors over the years? How many received tips about locations and timing that allowed them to capture supposedly candid moments? How many wrote stories based on information provided by the very people who then complained about press intrusion? The potential for additional revelations is considerable. The Sussexes built their entire post-royal brand on being victims of media persecution. Harry's memoir dwells extensively on tabloid cruelty. The Netflix documentary frames their departure as escape from relentless press harassment. The Oprah interview presented them as targets of institutional racism, amplified by racist media coverage. Every element of their public narrative depends on the press being villains. But what happens when journalists start revealing they were actually being used by Sussex PR? What happens when the supposed villains turn out to have been pawns in an elaborate image management scheme? The entire foundation of the Sussex brand starts to crack. Tom Sykes observed that Harry brings all his baggage everywhere, and the story becomes about him rather than his cause. The same pattern applies to their victimhood narrative. If audiences conclude that parts of the victimhood narrative were strategically shaped, what exactly are they supposed to sympathize with? While Harry appeared on podcasts discussing personal grooming, his brother took a different approach to public engagement. William appeared on Travis Kelce's show alongside Travis's brother Jason. The conversation touched on sports, family life, and various topics in a tone Shooter described as a little bit raunchy, but in control of the narrative. William demonstrated that he could be personable and entertaining without abandoning the dignity associated with his position. He showed personality without descending into vulgarity. He connected with a popular audience without making the interview about his trauma or his grievances. The contrast with Harry's podcast appearance could not be more stark. Then came Wimbledon. Kate appeared with William and two of their children, Prince George and Princess Charlotte. The images dominated coverage. Kate in the royal box, elegant and composed, the children behaving beautifully, learning how to conduct themselves in public. William and Kate sharing a moment of affection that photographers captured perfectly. Jennifer Lopez attended the same event wearing an enormous hat that violated Wimbledon protocols and blocked views for people seated behind her. She barely registered in coverage compared to the Wales family. The hierarchy of interest was clear to everyone watching. This contrast illustrates something important about how the two camps approach public life. The Sussexes try to manufacture moments. They stage leaks, arrange photo opportunities, brief reporters on their version of events. Everything is calculated to achieve a specific outcome. The Wales family simply shows up and wins. They manage coverage through visible official appearances rather than relying on anonymous briefings, and their presence naturally generates interest. They do not need to plant stories because their genuine interactions provide better material than anything a PR team could manufacture. Shooter noted that Kate struggled with this job initially. She is not a natural at public performance, but she did the work. She spent years learning her craft, understanding how to present herself, developing the skills necessary to represent the institution gracefully. She has spent hours and hours really learning how to do this, Shooter explained. Harry and Meghan just want the good stuff. They just want the glamorous stuff. They just want to turn up for the premieres. They do not want to do the work behind the scenes. Kate struggled with this job, but she did the work. That is the difference. The polo match kiss William and Kate shared was likely staged to counter the Sussex visit. That is how you beat the Sussexes without engaging them, Shooter said. You do not attack. You do not respond to their provocations. You simply demonstrate the alternative, and you let the public draw their own conclusions. The Wales family has mastered the art of winning news cycles without appearing to compete. They show up, they behave gracefully, they generate organic interest, and they leave the Sussexes looking desperate by comparison. Everything Charlotte Griffiths revealed points to a pattern that extends far beyond a single lunch at the Ivy. Consider the sequence of events. Sussex advisors contact a reporter and offer information. Stories appear portraying the couple positively. Photographs emerge from supposedly private meetings. Sussex sources express frustration about leaks, implying the palace is responsible. The public concludes that Buckingham Palace cannot be trusted to protect Harry and Meghan's privacy. Sympathy flows toward the wronged couple. The pattern is elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its cynicism. How many times is this cycle repeated? How many front-page stories about Sussex reconciliation efforts, or Sussex charitable work, or Sussex family struggles originated from the same lunch table strategy? How many photographers knew exactly where to position themselves because someone from the Sussex camp provided coordinates? The questions multiply once you understand the basic mechanism. Charlotte Griffiths crossed one of journalism's most guarded lines after, in her account, Harry's legal team attacked her credibility during the proceedings. That broke an implicit agreement between source and reporter. But the larger question is how many other journalists had similar agreements that might now be reconsidered. If reporters who protected Sussex sources feel betrayed by the subsequent legal attacks, they may decide that protection is no longer warranted. The floodgates may be opening. According to Taz, made an observation that resonates across this entire situation. All these reporters who pushed that Harry and Meghan wanted reconciliation are either totally delusional or on their payroll. The harsh assessment reflects growing skepticism about whether any Sussex public narrative can be trusted. When you discover that supposedly leaked stories were actually planted stories, you start questioning everything else you were told. It is clear Harry and Meghan are still waging a one-sided war against the royal family, Taz continued. They never stopped. They just changed tactics, because the royals will not let them anywhere near them. The deeper damage may not be measurable immediately. Trust erodes slowly. Once journalists stop believing Sussex sources, once editors become skeptical of Sussex narratives, once the public recognizes the manipulation pattern, the Sussexes lose their most powerful tool. They cannot manufacture sympathy if no one believes their stories. They cannot control their image if reporters refuse to transmit their talking points. The media ecosystem that once amplified their grievances may now amplify their exposure. Where does all of this leave the possibility of genuine family healing? Here is an uncomfortable truth. Genuine reconciliation between the Sussexes and the rest of the royal family would be good for everyone involved. Life is too short. Family matters. Harry's children deserve relationships with their grandfather and their cousins. King Charles deserves time with grandchildren he barely knows. William deserves a brother he can trust. Meghan deserves in-laws who welcome her genuinely. But after everything that has happened publicly, after the memoir that revealed private conversations and family grievances, after the Netflix documentary that portrayed the institution as racist and cruel, after the Oprah interview that accused unnamed family members of speculating about a child's skin color, after the multiple lawsuits that blamed everyone except the Sussexes for their problems, how exactly does anyone rebuild trust? The Charlotte Griffiths revelation adds another layer to this problem. If everything shared in private might end up in another Netflix special 6 months later, why would anyone speak candidly with Harry and Meghan? If reconciliation meetings might be leaked to friendly reporters and then spun as evidence of palace betrayal, why would anyone agree to meet? The manipulation pattern makes genuine connection nearly impossible. Neil Sean reported that King Charles hoped Catherine might persuade the brothers to meet independently during the recent UK visit. William wanted nothing to do with it. Catherine declined to get involved. The refusal was not about petty grudges or wounded pride. It reflected a practical assessment. What would such a meeting accomplish except give Harry material for his next project? Harry truly believes that William will have to cave in eventually, Sean reported. The belief seems disconnected from reality. Harry reportedly thinks that continued pressure, continued public appearances, continued proximity to the royal family will eventually force a reconciliation on Sussex terms. This belief may explain his persistence despite repeated failures. He sees himself playing a long game where ultimately the institution needs him more than he needs them. He is already looking at things like next year's Trooping the Colour, Sean noted, and of course things like Order of the Garter, the Thistle. They want to go back into that stepping into the royal world to pump up their brand. The evidence suggests otherwise. The Wales family dominates coverage without Sussex involvement. King Charles continues his reign without Sussex participation. The monarchy functions smoothly without needing to accommodate Sussex demands. If anything, the family has grown stronger by presenting a united front against external criticism. Harry may be waiting for influence that will never materialize. The lunch at the Ivy reveals something deep about how Harry and Meghan have operated since leaving royal life. Griffiths' disclosure suggests that at least one Sussex-linked advisor planted favorable stories and helped initiate coverage that was later presented publicly as an unwanted leak. They control the narrative by appearing not to control it. But Charlotte Griffiths just demonstrated what happens when sources lose the protection of confidentiality. And the question hovering over everything is simple but devastating. How many other journalists received similar invitations? How many have similar stories they have kept private until now? The Sussexes built their brand on being persecuted by the press. They secured major commercial opportunities while presenting themselves as targets of unfair tabloid treatment. They secured lucrative deals based partly on their status as victims of institutional cruelty. Every element of their public persona depends on the media being the villain in their story. But if more journalists corroborate Griffiths' account and reveal that they were used by Sussex PR rather than acting as antagonists, a central part of that narrative could collapse. The supposed villains would look more like participants in a media strategy, and audiences would have fresh reason to question how much of the Sussex story was carefully planted to generate sympathy. If the press was never the villain in this story, who exactly were Harry and Meghan fighting against all along? And what happens to their narrative when that truth fully emerges? Drop your thoughts below, like, subscribe, and stay tuned for what comes next.